Hey there YouTube, welcome back to another black powder update. I've got a few things to show you today. It's not going to be too long a video. I've been working on a couple of cannons, and I've basically managed to do, to complete my first two batteries for the English and the French. And I've kind of started work on another British battalion, of which so far I've literally only completed like one stand. So let's start off with the French. Now, this is obviously the first French gun that I completed, and obviously this is from Perry's. And you can obviously see that they've got long coats on, and obviously I've said this in many of my videos. My idea at the time when I picked this cannon up was to use the Victrix sets that come with 3 cannons to be able to make 2 batteries of 2 guns from each pack. That was my cat making that noise in the background. Bobo, stop causing chaos. So basically the first thing I did was I did a French Victrix French cannon to make my first French battery. I'll kind of bring it in a little bit closer. Now, the first thing obviously with Victrix stuff is that you've obviously got to stick it all together, and I did actually have instructions come in the Waterloo artillery set, so although I did have instructions, I still found it a little bit fiddly to put together, this cannon. But it is a lovely model. It's got it's got the chains underneath. It's got a nice meaty barrel, or the actual sort of cannon barrel. And like I say, apart from being a little bit fiddly to put together, it's actually a really nice model cannon. And obviously the 5 crew members, officer included. Now, I was told by somebody that I arranged the crew slightly wrong on this particular base, and I was kind of too far into the sort of basing of them to actually be able to easily correct it. So I've left these guys as they are, basically. I believe it's the actual the actual sponge guy that's in the wrong position. But it's like I said, I was kind of too far into it to actually bother to swap them around. So I'll have to recorrect it on my next one. Although strangely enough, nothing was said about this, and I've got the guy in the same position. So I don't know. Maybe I'll have to look around. I mean, the research that I did, the guy with the sponge was sort of stood there, because obviously at this particular point the cannon's literally about to be fired. Although I suppose, I mean, obviously the British, they seem to be like stood up here by the wheel, so I don't know if the French did the same sort of thing. But yeah, anyway, that's a little less important to the point, but I was very happy with how this came out. I did quite a bit of experimentation, like I said last time, with to sort of get the colour of the cannon, and I did a little bit more messing around to sort of try and improve it even more, and I came up with like my own sort of recipe, mainly using that Vallejo French tank colour, which is very handy. I'd say overall my sort of first impressions of sort of the Victrix guys was pretty impressive. I'd say really my only sort of complaint would be that there's not really much sort of in the way of indication of which arms, like I suppose, I mean, they give you the different options of arms you can use in each body, but no real indication of what arms would be used for what particular purposes. So you kind of have to kind of work those out yourself. And I must admit there were a few times where I'd stick these guys together and then decide that the arm combination's wrong, and I'd be pulling off arms and having to recut new arms and glue those guys on and then prime them and then sort of paint them back up to sort of the same sort of area that I'd already got to on the other figures, sort of thing, because I kind of painted all the guys at the same time. And it was a little bit annoying when, you know, you're sort of like to the point where you're sort of 70 or 80% through base coating, and you sort of figure out that the arm positions of the guy that's supposed to be doing this job are completely wrong, and you should have been using like another set of arms, or another left arm or another right arm, and you basically have to sort of go back, rip that arm off, and then sort of paint back up another arm. But I think, like I say, overall I'm pretty impressed with them, and I must admit that as far as like French artillery goes, I haven't really got any sort of decent reference material to sort of help me out. I didn't find the internet particularly amazingly helpful. I mean, there's loads of pictures of French artillery and stuff, but there's you know, I couldn't really find anything that says, you know, this is what these guys do at this particular stage of firing a cannon, or you know, where with the British, I've actually got like an actual a British artillery book, which I'll just quickly bring in, because let's just zoom this out a little bit. This book here, British Napoleonic Field Artillery. There's the guy who wrote it, and let me just I'll just bring the camera back just a little bit more. And this is a really cool book. I kind of, it's one of those books that even before I was really that interested in Napoleonics, I believe I got it in because I used to be a member of an old military book club, and they used to do every now and then sort of like a 5 books or 6 books for like £25 or £30, and this was one of the books that I received in one of those sort of lucky dips. And even though I wasn't particularly interested in sort of Napoleonics at that particular time, this book just particularly stood out to me, just because it's really well written, and it's got loads of amazing illustrations and stuff. And if I just flick through it now, you can see it just basically covers everything to do with the horse artillery, the foot artillery, the guns, the equipment they used, the colours of their uniforms, every single tool they used, what was in every single crate or box, and it's got these great sort of colour plates in the middle, which are really pretty amazing. And I found this book really helpful. And of course the other cool thing about it is that it does actually go through in great detail every position that a crew member would stand in during just about everything that you could do with a cannon, from you know, from it being limbered up and them galloping along to the point where they're actually you know, completely unlimbered it and it's ready to fire and then obviously reload. So in that sort of respect, my sort of British knowledge of artillery is a lot better than the French. But I guess I'll have to do a little bit more sort of research into that. But overall, I'm pretty chuffed to have a battery of 2 guns for my French. And of course, straight after this, I immediately did a British gun. So let me just bring the British battery in now. Move these guys out of the way. So here's, this was my original Waterloo starter set cannon, and the keen-eyed of you may notice that originally these guys had white trousers, and I decided to update them and give them the correct sort of grey trousers now. So these guys have had a little bit of an update, and I've also slightly muddied up the Canon wheels as well, so they can sort of match in with the new one. So that's the original, and here is the Victrix. So let's bring that in here. So this is the, like I say, the first Victrix British Canon that I did, and again you can see it's a really nice Canon. I didn't have instructions for this, so I basically looked them up online, and I managed to find the actual Victrix instructions that somebody had obviously sort of scanned on, or maybe it was even from the Victrix site itself. And again, you get these cool chains hanging underneath it, which I think look great. And it was, I would say it's a little easier to put together than the French, as far as sort of putting the Canon together. And the other thing I found quite helpful is that it gives you, although it doesn't give you exact positions of where crew members go, it does better illustrate the sort of positions that you can get out of the different combinations of arms you can use. And they're also not quite so limited to the bodies as some of the French. Of which I believe there's probably at least 2 or 3 bodies from the French set that were limited to certain arms, and the British seem to be a lot less restrictive in that sort of respect. So you can see here we've got I've got the little sort of grass hillock there to sort of match in with the original hillock on my original Canon. And I've sort of designed it so that these guys sit together like that, sort of side by side. And if I just zoom in a little bit, you can see that they actually match up quite well. And I was pretty chuffed with how it sort of turned out in the end. And that's that really. So that's the artillery piece, all the artillery pieces done so far, so let's just put those aside. Now the last thing, I'm going to just give you one last sort of close in look at these guys. So I think overall these guys were pretty much okay actually. You know, they painted up well, they've got nice sculpts, the arms glued on really easily. Unlike you know, some sort of some Warlord plastic bolt action figures, for instance, some of the plastics on those can be right pains in the rear end to sort of try and stick the arm on, you know, because they only go on in one particular position. But these guys' arms all seem to go on pretty well. It was easy to work out sort of an angle that you want to put them in. And in the end, I sort of decided to have this gun sort of like ready to fire, but not quite, you know, so i.e. It's basically waiting for the command to fire. So everything else is done, you know, it's been loaded, the powder bag has been pierced, etc, etc. And we've got the powder scoop guy there, the sponger, and he's got the bucket of water there, and this guy, he's the guy who takes care of the fuse and piercing the powder, and obviously the officer there with his telescope pouch on his front there. Yeah, I'm pretty chuffed with him, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. And it kind of, I was glad it sort of matches the sort of the base of the first Canon, which I was a little bit dubious about whether I could get an exact match. But yeah, so that's the two artillery batteries done. Now the last thing is that I basically started my next British battalion using the old Perrys, and of course the big difference between the Perrys and the Warlord guys is that the the Warlord guys are obviously in a set pose, and they're actually, it's actually quite easy to actually get to paint them en masse with, I mean, when I painted them, I tended to leave the backpacks off, and I'd say towards the end I'd even leave the heads off. I'd sort of base coat the heads and the backpack separately and stick them on towards the end. Where with the old Perrys, I was kind of thinking, well, a lot of these arms sort of cross their chests and would get in the way of their strapping and the backpack straps, and I have to sort of come up with a new way of painting these guys, because the sort of the original way that I painted my Warlord guys is not really going to work. So I kind of ended up coming up with a sort of, I suppose it's a sort of a 3-stage process, where I basically more or less base coat up the body without a head and without the backpack, and then when the body's complete, I then decide what positions they're going to be in. And luckily the instruction sheet does actually give you more or less every pose you can get out of the pack, so that's quite handy, because you can obviously work out in advance, are these guys going to fit onto a stand and not hinder the stands either side of them or in front of them. And in the end, I kind of worked out a system that kind of works, but I suppose the downside to it is that it is definitely going to be a slower way of painting. So what I've managed to do in like just under a week is literally one stand. And these guys are going to be the 69th, and I was pretty chuffed with how they came out. I really do like these Perry's guys. It took me a little bit of sort of working out to decide what positions to put them in. I think this is going to be like the second row of stands behind like the command stands, and I think they came out quite cool. And they weren't particularly too difficult to paint. I mean, I'm not 100% in paint mode at the moment. I'm still, still a little slow, and certainly not full on mass painting mode. But yeah, it's nice. It was nice to. I enjoyed painting them, and I'm kind of working on my next 4, which are basically going to be. I can't remember if I said in the last video that to make the box split into 2 battalions, I picked up a British command group from Perry's, and I'm going to add like 6 plastic British left over from Warlord. And when I was sort of putting them together, I mean, here's a classic example. These are basically going to be the guys that are on the next stand. So you can see that I've got these 2 Perry's guys here, and these guys are more or less ready to accept their arms. So I've basically painted the torso, done the white strapping. The particular green that these guys are is described as a blue-green, which I kind of, in the end, I had to sort of experiment a little to try and get the colour as close as possible. And in the end, I basically used a mixture of this dark turquoise, and I mixed in some of this, what's it called? Deep green, and it comes up with this sort of bluey green sort of mixture of a turquoise. And it comes out really quite cool. So I was kind of quite chuffed at that. So as you can see, with the old Perry's guys, these guys got the collars on, and the Warlord guys have the collars attached to the heads. And the other slight thing I noticed was that, I mean, they're more or less the same size, but the Warlord guys is a little bit chunkier, and their bases are a little bit chunkier. So when you try and sort of put them together, I've actually filed a couple of mils off, well, not a couple of mils, but probably about half a mil or maybe 1 mil off the bottom of their stand to try and get them to sort of match heights. And I think they're around about the same height now. But the you can see the Warlords guys just being slightly more chunky on the arms, sort of trying to get them to sort of fit in without looking too odd. I decided to kind of split the 6 guys between the two battalions. So these guys are probably going to have 4 Warlord guys mixed in, or maybe, I don't know, I haven't decided fully yet, but they're going to have at least 2, maybe 3 mixed into each battalion, so I can fully utilise more Perry's guys, because I do really like the Perry's guys. Yeah, so going back to the ones that I did, I kind of do a closer look at them. Like I say, I really enjoy painting them, and I think they're great figures. You can see the green there with the gold facing for the 69th, and strangely enough, the 73rd, which is going to be the other battalion, are actually use exactly the same colours for their facings, which is kind of strange. So I can just basically use the same exact colour scheme. But yeah, you can see that I went for a little sort of exploration of some of the different poses you can get, but still trying to go for poses that would stay within the confines of the stand, not to sort of hinder anything to the sides or in front or behind of. We've got one here with the old ramrod loading, which is kind of cool. And then one there sort of getting ready to pull back his lock. And then another one there just again maybe pouring some gunpowder in, loading. And of course this guy here more or less getting ready to shoulder his rifle. But yeah, that's so, you know, in the sort of face of things. And obviously the base of that grass, this is just literally something that I slapped on before I put the grass on, and I was just being particularly careful not to get any on their feet. You can see a couple of spaces that I missed there, but it doesn't really matter too much, because like I say, I'm basically going to go over it with grass anyway, so I'll just make sure I put a good dump of PVA in those missed spots, and the grass will cover it up. But yeah, so that's the first stand of my next British battalion, and I think they're gonna look really cool when they're done. I really do like these Perry's guys, and of course my sort of future plans, my next sort of when I finish sort of like this bunch of stuff that I've got backlogged up. I plan to get another box and sort of Hanoverianize them, basically turn them into Hanoverians, to boost up my, to basically make a whole brigade of Hanoverians. So I'm kind of happy about that, because obviously I wanted to do some battalions of Hanoverians that just aren't all wearing the same sort of flat caps, and you know, have like them in sort of normal shakos, and obviously with the Perrys that's going to allow me to do that. And I'm literally just going to get another sort of Perry's Hanoverian command group, and just kind of sort of split them up a little bit, so there's a few guys in flat caps, and obviously the Warlord guys. The 6 Warlord guys I'll need to sort of sneak in. I'll obviously, I'd imagine, we'll probably all utilise field caps as well, just to give them that little bit of difference. And of course the other thing is that I decided to not bother going to GMB flags for those guys, and actually just stick with the Warlord flags, because I was looking at the ones that I had left, and I mean, I know there's all this sort of hoo-ha about the sort of the King's colour, and I was thinking about it, and I was looking at the GMB versions, and it's like, yeah, they're okay, but they don't have the sort of specific regiments that I want. They just have sort of like generics, and then I was kind of looking at the sort of the historical actual, because my army's kind of based on the British, is it the second, let me find my Waterloo book, where's it gone? Oh, it's under here. I always forget this. Just bear with me for a few seconds. Here we go. So if I actually bring this into view, this is the Waterloo Companion. I'm sure a lot of you have probably got this book yourselves. This here is the 3rd British Infantry Division. It just so happens that the majority of the guys that I've got are kind of based on. So if we look here, you can see this is like the 1st brigade. So we've got the 33rd Foot, we've got the 69th, we've got the 73rd, and we got the 30th there. And then obviously I haven't got any King's German Legion, but here we have the Hanoverian Brigade. And although the first 2 units of Hanoverians that I've got, which were the Peony and the Griffhorn, aren't in this particular division, I was looking at my flags that I had left from the Warlord Hanoverian set, and just per chance, you can see here, here's the Hanoverian Brigade. So we've got the Bremen Field Battalion, which is just about see it there, and then the Verden Field Battalion. And if we look on the sheet here, get it round the right way, we have the Verden and the Bremen Field Battalions. So I thought, well, excellent, you know, might as well just stick with my Warlord flags for them, because, you know, at the end of the day, I've already used Warlord flags on the first 2 Hanoverian battalions that I've got, so I might as well just continue to use them. And that's basically what I decided to do in the end. So I was pretty chuffed about that. You know, it saves me, well, obviously the expense of having to replace all my Hanoverian flags, but also you know, ready supplying me with the next 2 battalions that I can actually use, and are sort of historically linked to the sort of division that my army sort of very, very loosely based on. I mean, I've got no real intention of actually fully building up that division, but you know, my sort of ideal sort of end thing. I mean, I suppose you could say it never really ends, but I'd be happy. I've worked out my plan of 3 battalions, or not battalions, 3 brigades per side, of which for the British it'll be a British infantry brigade, a Hanoverian infantry brigade, and then my 3rd brigade will be a mixture of cavalry and artillery batteries. And you know, and that's, you know, for me that works out really well for me, because you know, it's given me a hard plan to follow that I can stick to, and at the sort of end of the day, it actually leaves me with relatively little stuff to actually need to buy. You know, you're literally talking a box of Perrys, a box of French infantry, which could theoretically be Warlord, because I don't really. I've got 2 battalions ready to go, ready to be painted from my original box of French Perrys, with a French command group and a few extra plastic guys from Warlord, and you know, basically I've got 3 flags, so I use the first 2 flags for my French box, and then that leaves me with 1 flag, so I might as well just, you know, get a box of normal Warlord and swap out the officers with some of the Perry's officers I've got, and that takes care of that. And there's just the sort of the optional sort of 2nd unit of cavalry for the Allies, which I haven't really worked out what I want to get for those guys yet, and theoretically I could just leave it to the very, very end, and just just decide then. I think still on paper my French would probably end up being a little bit more powerful than my British, just because of that extra battery. Well, I mean, I haven't fully decided whether to just add one battery of 12 pounders or add a battery and a half, because I don't really want to get a metal 12 pounder with the old the Victrix 1804 to 1812 set, which was obviously sent to me by Wayland and was wrong. I kind of decided to turn those to utilise the 12 pounders out of that to give me a battery of 12 pounders. And I was thinking, theoretically I could use the 3 cannons and have a battery and a half, or I could buy another metal 12 pounder and have 2 batteries. But I think for now I'll probably just stick with the one. And obviously the French have got the 2 units of Chasseurs de Cheval, which kind of makes them a little bit more powerful. So I think overall the French will have an extra unit of cavalry and an extra battery of cannons over the British when at present. Obviously that'll be called out when I decide to what type of cavalry to get for the Allies, but yeah, so that's basically how I stand at the moment. Sorry that it's kind of turned into a little bit more of a waffle rather than actually showing you stuff, but yeah, I'm going to try and no matter what sort of situation I'm in, I'm going to try and sort of do, ideally minimum of a couple of videos a month, unless I have a particular painting spree, of which I might go up to maybe 3 or even 4 if I've got enough content. Yeah, so once again, sorry it's a little bit of a waffle, and I'll catch you next time.